G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Jacqui Louder, who's the psychologist at Collingwood Football Club in Melbourne Storm, based in Melbourne, Australia. So thanks for your time.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
So for those that aren't in Australia and don't appreciate Collingwood Football Club, Melbourne Storm, Collingwood Football Clubs are one of the most high-profile clubs in the Australian Football League, and Melbourne Storm will be typically in the NRL, which is the rugby league in Australia. So I'm always fascinated, as we're talking offline, about the relationship between business and sport, and certainly interested in your thoughts. And today we're going to be chatting about culture, leadership, ego management and burnout from a sporting context, but certainly how it can apply to a small business environment. So kick things off, Jacqui, just tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background and experience.
Yeah, so I grew up playing a lot of sport and played reasonably good level of netball and tennis. So I played pennant tennis, did a lot of sports growing up, and was always pretty academic as well. And so I really loved the balance between the two. And so when I left high school, I went and studied a dual degree in sports science and in psychology, knowing that I wanted to go into sports psychology, but I also wanted to have a clinical practice as well. And that's pretty much what I've run for the last 22 years. So when I left that, I then did my 4th year in organisational psychology, so my graduate diploma, just because I could understand that a sporting team is an organisation within itself. And I think the way you deal with employees is exactly the way we would be dealing with our coaches and our players. So I really found the parallels to be really helpful. It's given me the ability to be able to do psychometric testing and look at how we would be recruiting like you would in an organisation, how you manage systems, leadership, hierarchies, power balances, all of those sort of things. And then I did my master's in sports psychology because I love that high performance. How do we keep getting better? And just those challenges every single week at the highest level with so much pressure. I love those environments. So then when I left, I've sort of been involved in so many different sports. I've done 22 years of clinical practice, which I'm still doing. I've worked on the dirt bike circuit, the National Institute of Circus Arts for 13 years, so dealing with performers. I deal with a lot of actors or people in theatre. And then obviously with sporting teams, I was with North Melbourne in the AFL, now Melbourne Storm for the last 8 years, and Collingwood Footy Club for the last 7 years as well.
Fascinating. You've certainly got a well-rounded experience, haven't you?
Yeah, it's nice. The breadth has been really great.
Yes, I can imagine. And no doubt having your own practice as well, in business, I guess gives you the ability to bring that into what you learn from sport into business and vice versa.
Yeah, it's interesting because in a medical practice, I've worked in a really big multidisciplinary sports medicine centre. So again, when you look at the parallels between that and a sporting team, you've got, your practitioners who you might look at as your athletes. You've got your staff who we can't do our jobs without them. You've got knowledge differences and intellectual differences. So, it's certainly had its challenges there. And then dealing with a different personality every hour on the hour is a challenge every single day.
Yes, I could imagine. So if you go back, 20 odd years ago, when you were first into this, I could imagine, I'm just thinking back in a business and sports context, like having a psychologist or using a psychologist was probably nearly a dirty word back in those days. So what do you think sort of changed sort of the mindset from organisations and sporting teams?
I think for sporting teams, it's been, 99% of coaches have talked about, 99% is above the shoulders, but most of them did nothing about it. And I think we're starting to reach our maximum capacity going, how much more sports science knowledge can we have of the physiological state? Where's our point of difference? And you could be the fittest athlete in the world, but if you can't get your head right, you're not going to execute your skills. You then take that and go, well, let's put you into a team. And for Australian rules football, we've got 23 players that we have to manage in our team every single week that get selected, 18 on the field at a time. To get 18 heads together, even though I've got the elite of the elite in their physical abilities, is no easy feat. And I think people have started to understand that. When they realize we're not motivational, that's not our job. It's about understanding yourself, and then bringing in what you mentioned earlier about the ego, and managing the personalities. I think coaching has very much become very similar to what a manager's role is in a business, and it's managing the personalities and being able to help people thrive, not just survive in an organisation, and going, well, how do we do that the best way we can? And so I think it's just evolution of intellect coming into elite sport that's recognised that the psychological component is so huge now.
Yeah, and ego management, do you think that sort of is amplified in a sporting context, particularly AFL, because it's so public and there's so much focus on them? How do you sort of manage that in a sporting context, and how do you think that should be translated into a business context?
Well, I think they're actually very, very similar. Probably the biggest difference is that we're doing ours in a very public forum. We're in an organisation, the media aren't in your face every day and they're not watching every move that you make and writing about it on the back page of the paper. The other thing in sport, I think that makes it probably a little bit different is a good majority of our key employees, being our athletes, are underdeveloped brains. They're under the age of 25. So they're still developing as individuals and as humans, and they're learning who they are, but they've got a lot of different pressures put on them. So, your ego is very fragile as a human, but more so, I think, in a public domain where it's up for grabs and up for speculation and commentary every single time they go out there, whereas that's not the case for organisations. But then you look at hierarchies in organisations and there's egos around, who does all the work, but who's got the most power. And certainly if I look at a sporting organisation, the most power sits with the head coach, but often the head coach is not your most qualified person in the organisation. I've got 4 degrees, but I don't have the most power. I'm probably, well down on the list. But in an organisation, I'd be quite high on the list. But I think we also see that I think in organisations they can fall into an intelligence trap where, a higher level of education isn't always synonymous with good thinking. And intelligent and educated people are often less likely to learn from their mistakes. Whereas we don't have a choice in footy. We have to, and in elite sport, we have to learn from our mistakes. Otherwise, they're going to keep getting commented on. So I think we don't have the intelligence trap, but we have the talent trap. Just because you're talented doesn't mean you're going to be, the best athlete, because you've got to work in a team, and that's what an organisation is as well. So I think that, they're so similar.
Yeah, and I guess if you sort of translate a head coach to a small business owner, I think there's probably similar parallels a lot of the time.
100%.
I guess small business owners and even managers within it, good at technical stuff, that's passionate about the technical side, but they've never really, and this is a generalisation obviously, but most haven't invested time in leadership and management and what that means to their business. So I think there's there's certainly similarities from what you're saying.
Yeah, I think in one thing that sport forces us to do is basically provide scaffolding for our players, which in an organisation are your employees. But in sport, we do it by putting medical people around them, coaches around them, sports scientists around them, to help them become the best performers that they can be. I think often in an organisation that scaffolding is missed. We think people come in and they've got a degree, and we don't set them up to succeed. We don't put all the resources around them. We don't give them the right leadership. I think, instead of looking at personality, we should be looking at character, because your character is that ability to be able to just prioritize your values over your instincts, whereas personality, that's just how you're predisposed. So I think, again, we're starting to look at that side now in sport. We're going, it's great that you have talent, but if we're trying to get our organisation as a team to work together, we have to have character in there, because talent's going to set your floor, but character's going to set your ceiling. Yes. Type thing. I think in an organisation, it's going to be that same thing where if you can put the scaffolding around people like we do in sport, you're going to get more out of them. I think understanding as well in an organisation, collective intelligence, the value of that to a business is phenomenal. But I think a lot of the time people come in, they play a role, and we don't necessarily do the work with them to progress them from that role unless they're self-driven. And we're not necessarily, we've got plenty of people in your organisation and you don't even know half the intelligence they have because they don't get invited to certain meetings. Whereas in sport, we have all of our players in a meeting. Everyone can contribute, doesn't matter what your role is. So I think businesses can learn from that and go, don't just have your managers in there, bring in other people, because that collective intelligence is going to just be vital to setting up your culture for success. I think, giving people that sense of, well, I've got an opportunity here to show you what I know and get involved and contribute. And you add skin in the game for them then. And that's where people are going to perform the best when, we give you an opportunity, right? What are you going to do with it? That's no different in an organisation than we would do in sport as well. You get selected, let's see what you're going to do on the field.
Are you struggling to find time to work on your business? Or is your health and relationships out of balance? Lost confidence? Or are your weeks filled with fear? Our free 10-day Transform Your Performance online course shows you how to unlock at least 5 hours a week. We start with the secret to guaranteed success, and with over 100 lessons and free tools, you will become more focused, productive, and feel more in control of your business, health, and relationships. GrowSmallBusiness.com.
And I love that term, scaffolding, and providing that scaffolding for helping for success.
Yeah.
Because definitely, I guess in the context just of onboarding new people in small businesses and even large businesses, I might say. I mean, there's stats that show that there's not much investment of time and energy into onboarding, and hence, one of the outcomes is obviously poor retention. It does frustrate me when business owners talk about, can't find good people, can't keep good people. Well, I think a lot of them need to look in the mirror first and have a look at what they're doing. And to your point, getting their team involved as much as they can.
Yeah, I think, in sport, we're forced to look at all the tiny little details because we want the ultimate result. I think sometimes in businesses, those tiny details, because you're so busy trying to get that success and that outcome of that job or whatever. But your biggest success is going to come on focusing on those tiny details and getting them right and putting the time and effort into them. And, in sport, we're forced to do that. How do we get another 1%? How do we improve at the highest level in the performance that we're having? And I think, the other thing I think about when I go into any organisation, whether that be business or sport, I think the mindset that you put around your employees or your athletes is just so important. And for me, it's about creating that real growth mindset versus having people where they feel in a business they might be that imposter syndrome, where it's like, to me, the difference there is, an imposter is like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I think it's only going to be a matter of time before someone finds me out. But if I create a growth mindset, it's, I don't know what I'm doing, but it's a matter of time before I figure it out. So, and that empowers people to be able to do that. But if you don't put that scaffolding around them, if you don't get the right characters, if you don't use your collective intelligence in a group, then you're never going to reach the ultimate goals for your business or for your sport, because you haven't set people up to succeed. And that means understanding your people. I think that's the biggest thing for any company or any business that I would say, is take the time to know, understand, and really value your people, because that is the biggest investment that you could make, because no single person, no business has ever reached ultimate success until you start to have a group of people who are really embedded in a great culture and where they think they're going to be valued and contribute to it. The last thing you want is an organisation where all your individuals just walk in each day, do their jobs, walk out. That's just punching a card.
Exactly.
And we can't have that in sport, and the industry demands that of us to keep getting better. But I think you can definitely float and hide in an organisation if your leaders haven't figured out how to get the best out of you.
Well, that's a good point. I guess in sport, particularly professional sport like AFL, you can't hide, right?
Yeah. And that's why I think our ego in sport is challenged all the time. Whereas I think if you don't challenge an ego in a business, it's just going to sit there and then you flatline pretty much. And I think if you can protect, and that's where the psychological safety in an organisation comes in, is saying it's actually okay to continually try and improve, make small things better. It's not about perfection. It's actually about imperfection. I think being comfortable to fail, right? And the more you do that, the more risk you're allowed to take without a negative repercussion. But you then learn from it and go, what did we do wrong here? How do we improve next time? Like fail fast, fail often. We've all heard that. There's real merit in doing that, because then you teach people not to be afraid of mistakes.
Yes.
And how you handle mistakes is then very much contributes to managing the ego of your employees or the people in your team.
Yep. To say, I can't remember where I heard it from, but you either win or you learn. You never lose.
Yeah. And that's what I say all the time is, people will say, oh, you lost. And I'm like, well, no, we didn't. We didn't win that game, but we haven't lost anything. Nothing's been taken away from us. We may not have had a particular game, whether that be in points, but we've definitely gained in knowledge, or we've learned something and we want to just keep getting better. The unfortunate part, I guess, in such a public arena is that an uneducated, often naive media who have never put a team together or managed high-performing people still focus on the results. And we've got to manage our egos and block that out and go, no, we're managing our process here.
Yeah. And that must be so challenging for all those involved. And I guess that's really I guess a testament. If you can do that and do it well, it some sort of builds resilience in some way, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And resilience comes from your setbacks. And, I think for us, I'm involved in 2 football clubs that are very high profile, have had, Melbourne Storm has had an incredible amount of success over a 20-year period. When you even look at the results in AFL, obviously we won a premiership last year, but there's been continuous success really every couple of years. They're making grand finals or, always in the mix. So I think if you want to get sustained success, you've got to be prepared to look below the layers and just go, you know what? Not getting our results is teaching us, like you said, it's learning. And I love the learning part, because then you get to go back the next week and try again. But it's the same in business. You get to go back every day and go, well, how do I get a little bit better today? Or what's my goals for this week? And make your goals about the process, not just the outcome.
Yeah. I think, and you touched on it before, I think in business as well, you forget how important the little things are. So, do the little things really, really well.
Yep.
And sometimes, business owners might get bored and forget about those aspects that contribute to success. So I think that's
if you acknowledge the little things, like in sport, I think we do that really well. Like, in football, if someone takes a great mark or they spoil a ball or, they get, they lay a good tackle, we applaud that, we reward that. And they're the little things that then contribute to your team getting a goal. If you look at that from a business sense, what would you equate in your particular business? What are your tackles? What are your marks? What are your team efforts? What are your 1% plays that will allow your business to get that ultimate goal? And I think taking the time to break that down, and that's where I think the parallel between how we do it in sport versus how you do it in business, there's a lot of symmetry there.
Absolutely.
If you're prepared to look at it and then actually jump in and do it.
Yeah. Burnout is very common for small business owners and probably, just not small business owners, but across organisations. Albeit, I think in my experience, many small business owners can be their own worst enemy because they micromanage, they wear too many hats, no systems and processes, et cetera, et cetera. But so from your experience, have you got any sort of tips to help with burnout?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for that is learning how to have a self-awareness. Our bodies are really smart and they tell us. And I think if you look at success, you're not going to do it on your own. So if you've got that mentality, I have to work harder than everyone else. Well, no, just work smarter than everyone else, or work at your best capacity, but not listening to your body, not listening to other people, not recognizing the levels of fatigue, not putting rest in. Good time management is not filling every minute of the day.
Yes.
Good time management is maximizing your peak periods and knowing when your drop-offs are. Don't compromise on your sleep and don't compromise on your food. And I think they're two of the biggest things that when people start putting, work and those things before social, when you start thinking you need to be staying up till 11, 12, at night, and then you're getting up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., like your body is not, it's going to tell you, but it's going to break down if you ignore it. And that's when you're going to end up with, your real chronic fatigues and those sort of conditions. So I think when you're looking at burnout, having a self-awareness, which can come from journaling, sitting back every day, putting your mindfulness things in, which to me, mindfulness is just keeping your head in your ass in the same place.
Yeah.
Right? So just, don't always have to be stimulated. Sometimes learning is just being able to just sit with yourself and just learn how to control your thoughts and then figure out how to use your best energy at the best time of your day.
Yeah, that's a very good point and some good insights and tips. Just to wrap up, Jacqui, I guess in a sporting sense, it's obviously staying success is important, and success is not, as you noted, not just necessarily winning a premiership or the like, but you've touched on, team culture is no doubt so important to creating a successful team.
Yeah.
Are there any, just to close out, any sort of tips you can give our audience to sort of build a great team culture for sustained success?
Yeah, I think your culture has got to come, like I said, picking your characters over just a personality. It's using that collective intelligence. It's praising people rather than always telling them what they've done wrong. You go in and do a performance review, and so often you ask someone how their performance review was, and it was all the things they're not doing well. There wasn't one discussion around, hey, here's all the things you're doing great. So I think for me, highlighting someone's real value first and then their work-ons. If every time I come to you and the first thing I tell you is what you're not doing well and what I need you to improve, you're not going to want to have a conversation with me.
Yep.
But if I come to you and I say to you, hey, you're doing this really well, I think we can still keep getting better here, but I'm loving what you're doing here. Now I've opened up your mind, you're going to have a conversation with me. So I think it's those things culturally is back up what you say you're going to do. Praise your staff, create a growth mindset where you don't expect everyone to be equal, but you treat them equally fairly. And I think that's the more important thing.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for your time, Jacqui. I could talk a lot longer with you. We're, as we said at the outset, we both love the sport and organisational piece, and how they connect. So appreciate it. I think you've given our audience a lot of insights and some good knowledge to take away, hopefully, into their business. So thanks again.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
We'd greatly appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to leave our podcast a review on iTunes. If you don't have an account, simply follow us on Spotify. You'll help other small business owners find the cast and valuable content our guests share.